Hey, what's up? It's Andy from 7 Card Flush Poker. We are back at it again today. This is a Thursday afternoon session up at Orange City Racing and Card Club. Well, I have no idea what to expect from this coming session. So let's get in there and play some cards. Tonight's episode of the vlog is brought to you by White Claw Hard Seltzer. White Claw Hard Seltzer, because not everybody likes craft beer. Oh yeah, that's good. In the first hand we're going to look at tonight, I'm sitting in the hijack and I have King Jack offsuit. There's a raise from under the gun to $10 and a player in middle position calls, and I go ahead and decide to call as well. Both blinds fold and we're off to a flop. That flop is Queen 6-8 Rainbow. Under the gun then down bets to $6. I don't think you're going to get anybody to fold with a $6 bet into a $30 plus pot, so me in middle position both make the call. The turn is another 6, so this brings a pair of 6s on the board. Under the gun bets 15. Middle position min clicks, makes it $30. At this point, I don't see any way that I can continue, so I go ahead and get out of the way. And under the gun makes the call, so we're off to see a river, and that river is a 4. Under the gun then leads out for $60 on the river, which I find a little bit odd. And then the middle position player folds. So I'm not sure what either player had, but it's a really interesting way to start the night off. The next hand of the night, we look down under the gun at King Queen offsuit. I go ahead and open the action with a raise to $13. Middle position calls and the hijack raises to 30, so a little bit more than a min click. I go ahead and call, and the middle position player calls as well, so we're off 3 ways to a flop. The flop is 7-8-9 with 2 diamonds. I check and the middle position player bets out for $40. The hijack then decides to go ahead and rip his stack all in. Obviously I can't continue on this hand either, so I'm going to go ahead and fold and get out of the way. And the middle position player calls. The turn is a 10 of diamonds and the river is an ace of diamonds, putting 4 diamonds out on the board. The hijack is very reluctant to flip his hand over, and the middle position player makes a comment that he called the bet, so he wants to see the cards, and the hijack kind of sheepishly flips over pocket 5s. And the middle position player flips over 7-8 offsuit with the 7 of diamonds. So he ends up flushing out and scooping a pot of a little more than $300. So some fucking insanity up here at the card room. I did not capture really any of the hand, but there was essentially a 4-way all-in, 3 separate pots. A guy had flopped a straight, thought he lost the hand, thought he got rivered for a boat, and he like walked away, and so the dealer thought he had forfeited his hand, and she pushed the pot to the wrong person. Now there's a bunch of drama about who's supposed to have how much money. They're pulling camera footage. It is nuts. So we're gonna take a little break here and see what happens. On a board of deuce 4-6 in this 4-way all-in action, a guy who had scooped the first hand when I sat down with a set of 10s. Something interesting about this player, I don't think he's played at Orange City before. He had about 450 bucks in front of him, but 300 of it was in his rack. And I figured he was just putting it in his rack because he was waiting for his big blind to come around or something like that, and he was going to leave. And a player made a comment that that money had to stay in play, and he actually said, "Oh, does it?" So I guess he actually wanted to take his $300 off the table and put it in his pocket. And I think when he called the second or third all in, I don't think he realized he was going to have to call the entire $100 bet coming from that player. I think he was only going to have to call with the 60 some odd dollars he had in front of him. But he goes ahead. The dealer enforces the rule, and he goes ahead and he makes the call. And the guy to my right who started all this action very excitedly flips over 3-5. So he flopped the straight. He was very proud of the fact that he flopped the straight. So the turn card is a blank and the river is another deuce, which pairs the board. The guy to my left, everybody just starts turning over hands. Nobody's really following the order. And so the guy to my left turns over ace-5. So he's got aces and deuces, playing a kicker off the board. The club draw never gets there, so the hijack doesn't have it. The 10s don't improve. But the guy to my right, apparently, when he saw the twos pair on the river, I thought someone had somehow boated up. And when the hand was over, he very aggressively walked away from the table, as if somebody would do if they lost the hand. He didn't take a step back or take a couple steps back to celebrate the win, or to let his heartbeat, rest or catch up. He walked away from the table very aggressively as if he lost the hand. And this confused the dealer, and she ended up pushing the main pot to the wrong player. And a couple of us sitting there were like, well, hold on a second. How did that guy lose if he had a straight? And she realized that she had kind of been faked out by his action of him stepping away from the table, and hadn't realized that his straight was still good. And so he stepped away from the table so aggressively because he went to the ATM, and we know this because he came back with 60 bucks cash in his hand, and he later made a comment about how he should be refunded his ATM fee because he didn't need to go to the ATM. So it's a very unique situation where the wrong player was awarded the pot. There was a lot of discussion about how much money this player had when the hand started. He didn't know how much he had when he started, which is why it's always a good idea to know what your chip stack is. There was, I don't want to say arguing, but people who were very opinionated on how they thought the hand went down and what they thought he had in his hand. But we're stuck in a dilemma. The wrong guy's been pushed the pot, and nobody can seem to agree on how much money is supposed to be awarded to various players. So I think Orange City handled this situation really well. They called the floor over, who then called another floor member over, and they actually ended up pulling the tapes. Every table at pretty much any card room you go to, at least any reputable card room, is going to have a camera focused on that table to watch the action, to make sure that players are staying in line, to make sure dealers are taking care of the things they need to. And so they went through and pulled the footage and watched it back frame by frame to figure out who bet what and how much money was supposed to be in the pot. And in the end, they did in fact award the main pot about $263 to the guy that flopped the straight. So I think they handled this really unique, really odd situation well. I figured nobody was going to like the results of whatever decision they made, but actually everybody seemed to agree with the way it played out, and everybody was cool with the decisions that were made. So after about an 8 to 10 minute break, play shall continue. I think it's important to note that when I arrived to a very tough table. The people who were sitting at the table all had very healthy stacks. Almost all of them had more than the max buy-in of $200 in front of them. A lot of people doing chip tricks, a lot of people wearing shades. I could definitely tell that this was not a table full of fish like I was hoping for, but rather I got stuck at the table that had a lot of very good, very skilled players. And they were action crazy. These guys wanted to push the action. They wanted big pots. I think in the first 5 hands that I saw while sitting at the table, there were 3 instances of an all-in, and all of these pots were well over $300. So there was a lot of money moving around at this table. I was actually looking for a little bit of a softer crowd, given the fact that there was a radio-sponsored tournament at the card room that night, and when I had played it the month before, there were just a lot of fish out there that were really just donating money. And so that's really what I was looking for when I sat down at this table. And I do not think I got that in this group of players when I sat down. So I really very early felt outmatched at this table. With all that being said, we're in middle position. We look down at Jack 8 offsuit. There's a button straddled to $5. There's 2 callers ahead of me, so I go ahead and decide to call as well. And when it gets back to the button, he decides to go ahead and min click it up to $10. That's not going to deter anybody from folding, so everybody makes the call and we're off to a flop. The flop is Queen 6-3 with 2 clubs, and the action checks through, so we're going to go to the turn for free. The turn is an 8 of hearts. And so when I see this card, I go ahead and I decide to bet out for $15. I'm not crazy at my sizing looking back at it now. Perhaps I should have maybe bet a little bit higher to protect my hand and really tried to figure out where I'm at. The under the gun player calls and everybody else folds, so we're headed off to a river. The river is the 7 of diamonds, and under the gun leads very quickly for $45. And this is a spot where the old me would have folded instantly. I would just automatically assume I'm up against a queen and there's no way my hand can be good. But going back and thinking about all of the poker vlogs that I've been watching online, A bet of this size and this quickness usually indicates a missed flush draw. So I'm either up against a club draw that didn't get there, or I'm up against a queen that's going to be good. But again, the sizing of the bet makes me think that he's trying to indicate that he definitely has the hand and he's trying to get me to fold anything for value. So I think about it for a minute and I end up tossing in a chip to call, and he says, good call. And he does not want to flip over his hand, so I go ahead and show the jack 8 and he mucks his hand. So my read was right. He was probably on a club draw that didn't get there, tried to bet and look very strong and ended up having air, and so I scooped this pot. It was at that moment that I realized maybe I'm not outmatched at this table, but perhaps I do have a good read on people. It's still an action table and it's not going to be an easy night, but I'm not necessarily in above my head. So I decided to go ahead and stick around a little bit longer and see what develops over this night. We're in the big blind now. We look down at ace-4 offsuit. There are 4 limpers to me, and I decided to go ahead and check the action and see the flop. The flop is ace-queen-8, and the action checks around to under the gun, and he decides to go ahead and bet out $10. The button makes the call, and I go ahead and decide to make the call as well, and there's 3 of us headed to a turn. That turn is the ace of clubs, so now I have 3 of a kind, but I've got some serious kicker problems. I go ahead and check this hand because I really want to see where I'm at and see how strong my opponent is, so I check over and under the gun decides to go ahead and bet out for 30. The button folds and I decide I either have to make a decision on raising or on calling. Raising is dangerous because I have serious kicker issues and almost any other ace rag hand is going to beat me in this pot. I could just call here and look to see a river and actually hope that it's a high card to try to create a chop. I don't think that I can raise and get any other ace to fold because pretty much any ace is going to be strong in this situation. And I know just how weak my kicker is. So I don't think I'm going to be able to bully anybody out of this pot. So I decided to go ahead and just make the call, see a river, and evaluate it. The river ends up being a 9, so it's not really going to change much on the board, but again, I've got huge kicker problems, so I'm going to go ahead and check it over and see what action takes place and really figure out how good my hand is. And under the gun decides to go ahead and check it back, and so I flip over my ace-4 and he flips over ace-10 suited. So I was in fact up against another ace. He did have a pretty good kicker, and I really don't think there's any way that I could have raised in this hand that would have induced a fold. So I actually think I lost the minimum on this hand, and I'm kind of proud of the way I played this hand, that I didn't commit my stack and did not get my money in behind, and I think I really did lose the minimum on this hand. The very next hand, we're in the small blind and we look down at ace-king offsuit. There are 3 callers when it gets to me, and I raise to 15. Looking back now, I probably should have raised a little bit more, being that I'm out of position. I should probably look to eliminate more players. I love ace-king as a hand, but it can be very tough to play when you're first to act, especially when you don't hit a flop. So I don't know if I made the right raise sizing here. It gets 2 folds when it gets back to the button, and he min-clicks to 30. I'm very confused by this action. I'm not exactly sure what to do here. Part of me wants to jam, realizing I'm probably up against some sort of pocket pair because he limped in the beginning. So I'm probably up against something like 5s or 6s or 7s or 8s. I'm probably not up against jacks or queens or kings. I couldn't see a limp re-raise, although he is in position. But the proper action is probably to go ahead and 4-bet here. But I don't, I just make the call. And so there's 2 of us and we're off to a flop. The flop is 8-4-7. I go ahead and check it over to the button. He bets $20 and I go ahead and call. I want to see a turn and evaluate my action from there. The turn is a 3. And so this is probably the point where I need to make a move, but I sheepishly check over to him and he bets $20 again. I didn't think of it at the time when it was happening, but looking back now, I now realize that was 5-1 on a call, and I really don't have to be right that many times to be profitable in the long run. But I definitely know I'm up against something, and if I don't spike an ace or a king, I have absolutely no flush draw, I have no straight draw. So if I don't hit my money card on the river, I'm not really sure what I can do or what I can bet that's going to get him off of a hand. So realizing that I'm probably behind and need a lot of help, despite the fact I'm getting such good pot odds, I go ahead and I make the fold. And he was nice enough to show me that he had a pair of 6s. So he's got, middle pair, and he's got a gut shot straight draw, And sure enough, when he did the min click on the button, I was in fact, facing a small to mid pocket pair. I probably could have played that hand a lot better. Go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section. Let me know how you would have played that hand. I don't have much time to think about it though, because we look down on the button at a pair of kings. There's 3 calls, and again I raised to $15. That's pretty standard in this 1-2 game. It's 7.5 times the big blind. There's definitely justification for raising more, but I'm definitely trying to get some value because of the implied odds. I know that as long as I can get a clean run out, I'm going to get paid by these guys. There's a lot of action on this table. And so all I'm looking for is a safe flop to probably jam the rest of my stack in and try to get a double up. So the idea is that I raise to $15. The big blind goes ahead and calls, as do 2 of the other 3 people in the pot. So the best raises are the ones that get almost nobody to fold. We're going 4 ways to a flop, but I feel good because I have kings on the button. The flop is 3-5-7, and I get some fantastic news when the big blind goes ahead and decides to bet out for $30. This seems like a really safe flop for me, and this hand is playing out exactly how I was hoping it would. Putting in a raise, getting some calls, getting a safe flop, and getting to a spot where I can jam my stack. The other 2 players fold. I have about $108 total in my stack. There's already $90 in the pot. There's really not an amount that I can raise to that will leave me a good stack size behind to bet. I could try to do a min raise or something like that to $60, but that's only going to leave less than $50 behind. So really, there's only one of 2 plays I can make. I can either make a real nitty fold, or you jam that stack in there and get that double up. So that's exactly what I do. I go ahead and push my stack all in for the last $108. And the big blind kind of does something weird. I guess I didn't hear him say call, and he's kind of just floating a chip out in front. And he kind of went to throw it, but it didn't leave his hand, and I wasn't sure what was happening. But the dealer went ahead and continued with the hand, and so I figured that he had made the call, and in fact he had. The turn is a 4, and it brings out a second flush draw on the board, and so I decided to go ahead and flip over my hand to show him I'm not on a flush draw, but my hand is made. The river is a 9. That's a pretty safe card for me. The big blind goes ahead and decides to flip over his hand, and he has 5-7 for 2 pair. This was an incredibly frustrating spot. Again, I think there's merits to making a larger raise pre-flop, but this was a super action table, and this was a super action guy. If I raised to 20, he's still making that call. I think if I raised to 25, he's still making that call. So I don't think this hand's going to play out any differently than it did, unless I do something drastic like a huge raise or even a shove on the river.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.